Marhaban. My name is Ian Campbell, and this series of 10 videos is the fifth series in a whole set of videos explaining the basics of how to speak, read, and write Al-Fusha or Modern Standard Arabic. These videos will explore the basics of using verbs in Arabic. This first video will show the best practice for how to learn a verb. So this one's called Verbs 1 because there's really three separate groups of lessons about verbs. But this one is going to mostly tackle the present tense and how to use verbs in everyday conversation. So let's start with the word al-fi'l. Al-fi'l literally means action or doing and is our word for verb. The plural is al-af'al, which is a very common plural pattern for nouns. So this can mean actions or it can mean verbs. Verb, it's what you do. Verbs in Arabic can actually be really complicated. However, the very basics of how to use a verb in the present tense are really pretty easy. So this lesson is going to frame how we see verbs in Arabic and the best way to learn them when you learn a new verb. In English, it's very simple. To drink is a verb. Okay, you learned it. Sometimes you have to learn a funny past tense, like it's drank instead of drinked. And then there's usually a adjective form, drunk, as well, as in something that has been drunk, not someone who is a drunk. And in Arabic, we have to learn 5 things, but 3 of them are the ones we have to learn, and the other 2 are easy. So all basic verbs have a 3-letter root and 5 parts, and these parts are the past tense, the present tense, what we call in English a gerund, not a word that'll be familiar to many of you. Sometimes this is called a verbal noun. That is the act of doing that thing. And then the doer and the done to. If you know the first 3, you could always derive the last 2 because they're strictly regular. So let's take the verb kataba. We've seen kitab for book before and maktab for office. The root kaftaba means to write something, and the name of the verb is kataba, to write. Kataba really means he wrote, and this is the default form for the verb. Kataba is also the name of the verb because we don't have a to write form in Arabic. So kataba means he wrote. Yaktubu means he writes. Al-kitaba means the act of writing something. Not writing in the sense of I am writing a paper, but in the sense of writing papers is fun. It's not, actually. The ing suffix in English really means two closely related things, and if you're a native speaker of English, you never think about this, but it does. So al-kitaba is writing in the sense of the act of writing something. A katib is a writer, mektub is written. So if you know these first 3 forms of the verb, you can always derive the last 2 because they're regular, and this is one of the key takeaways here. So in Arabic, the past tense is like the main tense of the verb. One way in which Arabic is significantly easier than English is that Arabic only has 2 verb tenses, past and present. There's a future tense, but it's really just the present tense with a prefix on it. And Arabic doesn't have all the funny verb tenses like he will have gone somewhere, or I would have known, or since I live in the US South, I could say he could have known. Arabic doesn't do this. There's only 2 tenses, and they get used in different circumstances to mean the kinds of things we would use funny verb tenses for in English. So the past tense is the main tense of the verb. And this set of lessons isn't really going to talk about the past tense except right here. In the next set of lessons, I'll talk about the past tense and also irregular verbs. But this one is going to mostly stick to regular verbs in the present tense because it's a lot easier and you can express yourself really well with them. So the he did form, kataba here, is also the name of the verb. So if we're talking about the verb, its name is kataba. We would say to write in English, but we don't have that form in Arabic. And we add suffixes to conjugate the past. If you go back to one of the previous sets of lessons where I'm talking about the verb laysa, that verb is using the past tense suffixes. So they'll be a little bit familiar to you when in the next set of videos I talk about the past tense. So here's a bunch of examples of them. Kataba literally means he wrote, but is also the name of the verb, to write. Fa'ala literally means he did, also the name of the verb to do. We use the fa'ain lem root, the to do root, to name the various patterns in Arabic. Shariba, and here its middle vowel is a kasra instead of a fatha, means he drank. Kabura, and here its middle vowel is a dhamma rather than a fatha, means he grew or aged or got larger. Kabir is big. You can see where it comes from. So we use suffixes in the past tense. So shariba, he drank, becomes sharibtu, I drank, just like lestu is I am not. Arafa, to know something, becomes arafna, we knew, just like lesna is we are not. And again, the past tense I'll get to in the next set of videos. Just know that it exists for right now. Just knowing the three root letters, however, doesn't tell you the middle vowel. So you'll often see bad textbooks give you just the letters kaftaba and say this means to write. But you have to know it's kataba, not katiba or katuba, because different verbs are going to have different middle vowels. And there's no rhyme or reason to them. The root letters don't give you an idea of what the middle vowel is going to be. You just memorize it when you learn the verb, which is boring, but you kind of have to do it. And the present tense also has a middle vowel as well, and it could be the same or it could be different from the middle vowel in the past tense. You just have to learn them. That's just part of learning the verbs. So kataba is he wrote, yaktobo is he writes. So typically present tense verb have sukun on the first letter and then a middle vowel on the second letter before this dhamma on the end here. So it could be yaktaba or it could be yaktabu, it could be yaktibu, but it happens to be yaktobu here. You just have to learn that when you learn the verb. Yaf'alu is he does. And we give them in masculine singular just as the default. It's just how Arabic rolls. There's no good reason for it. Yashrabu is he drinks. Yakburu is he grows. So this verb takes fatha as a middle vowel. This verb takes dhamma as a middle vowel. So then in the present tense, we typically use prefixes and sometimes suffixes to conjugate verbs. So ashrab is I drink. Ashrab. So it's really ashrabu, but we don't often say this little dhamma at the end. Na'rif is we know. This verb takes kasra in the present tense. So this is just something you have to learn as you learn the verb. So every Arabic verb also has what's called a mustar. Mustar really means source, like source of water or source of conflict. In English, this is called a gerund, which is not a word that most American college students will know. In fact, I didn't know until I started studying Arabic. So this is a noun, not a verb. It's the act of doing that particular action. And we use these all the time in Arabic, way more than we do in English. So you have to memorize each one because you don't know what its form is going to be just from knowing the three root letters of the verb. So al-kitaba is the act of writing, not writing in the sense of I am writing a paper. Al-fi'l is the act of doing, not doing in the sense of I am doing my homework. Ashurb is the act of drinking, not I am drinking coffee, but I like drinking coffee. To an English speaker, it isn't really obvious that drinking can mean two different things, but trust me, it can. So kabr is the act of growing. Al-ma'rifa is the act of knowing something. We use these way more in Arabic than we do in English. I'll go into them in great and loving detail in a couple of the later videos in this particular series, and we'll get to know them much better. We use them when we subordinate one verb to another, like I want to know something. In Arabic, we're going to say I want knowing something. But again, I'll get to that in great detail later. This is just for introductory purposes. So once you know the verb's middle vowel in the past and the middle vowel in the present and what's called the mustar or gerund or sometimes verbal noun, then you have total control over the verb. So the best way to learn verbs is as a three-word series. So kataba yaktubu al-kitaba. He wrote He writes, the act of writing. Now you know everything you need to know about this verb. It takes fatha in the past tense on its middle letter. It takes dhamma in the present tense in its middle letter. And its mustar form is al-kitab. Fa'ala means he did. Yaf'alu, he does. Al-fi'l, the act of doing. You know this verb takes fatha in the present or past and present tenses, and here is the form of its mustar. Shariba, yashrabu, ashurb, he drank, he drinks, the act of drinking. It uses kasra on its middle letter in the past tense, fatha in the present tense, and here is the form of its mustar. These are all the things you cannot predict from just knowing the 3 root letters. So if you learn verbs as a 3-word series, you'll have full control over the verb, and you won't ever need to look anything up. A lot of textbooks will either give you shariba is drink, or yashrab is drink, and not really give you everything you need to know in order to fully use the verb, which is kind of why I'm going through this great detail here to explain it to you. So I will be putting up, once I'm done with this video series, I'm going to be putting up, along with the PDFs of the lessons, a bunch of vocabulary lists that gives you simple, useful verbs that are totally regular and you can integrate into your discourse. So once you know these 3 things, the other 2 parts are always completely regular and they're easy to derive. The first one is called the ism fa'il, the name of the doer. In English, this is called an active participle, also a phrase you might not know. And it always has the fa'il pattern. And if you've been following along with all these videos, I've already mentioned several times that fa'il is the doer of that action. So al-katib is a writer, a fa'il, a doer, a sharib, a drinker. And these are nouns, and sometimes they're adjectives as well. In fact, standard Arabic thinks of nouns and adjectives as being effectively the same thing, so they can kind of switch back and forth. In colloquial Arabic, we'll often use this instead of conjugating the verb. We'll say a writer of something instead of I am writing something. And they often take on other meanings as well. So sharib literally means drinker, but it also means mustache because you're filtering your qahwa or your shai through your mustache. I'm always jealous as someone who's genetically incapable of growing one. So this is the ism fa'il, the doer, the 4th form of the verb. You only need to learn the first 3 because you can always form these as regular words. So if it's representing a woman, it's a katiba. And then you'll put the human plural endings on them, or sometimes they'll have irregular human plural endings as well. Irregular human plural forms, that is. The last one is called the ism al-maf'ul, the name of the done to, or the passive participle in English. And it has the maf'ul pattern, one of the common patterns. And this means something that has had the action of the verb done to it. So maktub is written, as in these words have been written on the screen, though in fact they were typed. Maf'ul is done, as in something that has been done. Mashrub is drunk, not in the sense of someone who has an alcohol problem or is under the influence, but rather something that has been drunk. And again, these are usually adjectives, but sometimes nouns. And they will inflect for gender and number like regular nouns will or regular adjectives will. And they also often have different meanings. So maktub literally means written, but it also means your fate, F-A-T-E, fate, in English. Arabic cultures tend to be fatalistic, which means they tend to think of like destiny as already having been set for you. Not always, but a little more than ours does. So something bad happens, sometimes somebody might say you, oh, maktub, like it was written, like sorry, that was kind of destined to happen. What's destined to happen is that we're going to have 9 more videos about this, and I'm going to go through each of the present tense issues in loving detail and show you how to do things like make commands, use verbs with other verbs, and so forth. But for now, I am